Good evening. I am pleased to hold tonight the second chapter in series conversations with international curators in correlation with our current exhibition Black Box, opened 2 months ago. I am happy to see all of you and wanted to point out we will have time in the end for few questions. I'm excited that the second conversation is with Aric Chen. Aric is the incoming General and Artistic Director of the new museum, the
new
Institute of New Museum, the new Institute, sorry, Het Nieuwe, the Institute for Architecture, Design and Digital Culture in Rotterdam. Currently, Aric is based in Shanghai, where he is professor and founding director of the curatorial lab at the College of Design and Innovation at Tongji. That's right, Tongji?
Yeah, that's right.
University. He also currently serves as curatorial director for the Design Miami Fairs in Basel and Miami Beach. For 6 years, he was lead curator for design and architecture at M+, the new museum for visual culture, opening later this year in Hong Kong, eventually, huh? Before we start, I was wondering if we can take a short trip down memory lane. I have known Aric for more than 10 years, as he was part of the curatorial team that curated Design Museum Holon first exhibition, The State of Things. This is the first exhibition. He was part of the curatorial team that curated this exhibition, and we collaborated again. This is another picture of the exhibition, the first exhibition, and we collaborated again when I invited him to co-curate with me the State of Extremes, just the exhibition that marked 10 years since the opening of Design Museum Holon, and we presented just a year ago. Images I showed was State of Things, the first exhibition, and that's the image of the space, as you remember, Aric.
Yeah.
And then State of Extreme, our last exhibition that we did together, that was 2019. And these are pictures of the space. As you all know, museums are considered in large as these dinosaurs moving slowly through time, always arriving late at the party. With the State of Extremes that opened December 2019, just before the worldwide pandemic took us all by surprise, I feel we managed to get ahead of ourselves, as you can see here in the leading image of the exhibition. Do you think this is the case here, Aric, about this exhibition?
Well, you know, I think to the extent that we were getting ahead of ourselves, we were doing our jobs, I guess, you know. I think that's one thing that curators are supposed to do, at least for contemporary shows, is to always look a little bit ahead. Now, in our case, you know, to the extent that, as many people have said, the pandemic didn't so much change the world as it accelerated processes that were already underway. I think perhaps it just heightened some of the phenomena that we were looking at already in the show.
Yeah, but still, I think that image with the mask was really, took us, we were shocked to realize that everybody is wearing masks, and not only, you know, those exotic people from the other side of the world, but it was us for a minute. So I think that was putting us ahead of time.
Sure.
One more question before we move on. I was thrilled for you when I learned you were chosen to lead the new institute in Rotterdam. Can you maybe tell us more about that institute and your role in there?
Yeah, sure. So actually, officially next week, though I'll still be based in Shanghai for a few more months, I begin as general and artistic director for the new institute, which was formed about 8 years ago, 8-9 years ago, through the merger of 3 Dutch national institutes or organizations for architecture, design, and digital culture. The best known is probably the Netherlands Architecture Institute, which held the National Archive for Architecture and Urbanism. So these are all combined into the new institute, and this is an organization I've admired greatly since it was founded. I was talking about how our jobs are always to be, as curators of the contemporary, at least, or as curators in general, even, to always be a few steps ahead, or to always think a few steps ahead. And this institute really has that in its DNA. It's been doing incredible. It's an incredible team that has been doing really innovative thinking and work and exhibitions. Not just in looking at some of the critical issues that confront us now and that will confront us probably in the future, but also in revisiting the past. And as many of us know, those who follow museums of historical collections, and the New Institute also has an historical collection, the way we narrate the past has also become a very important discussion. So I'm incredibly sad to be leaving China. I wasn't planning to leave, but I'm really, really excited about this. And I hope everybody can come to Rotterdam when that is possible.
Yeah, we'll sure come now that you are going to be there. One more question. No, we had that question. Thank you for that. I think it's time we talk about the reason we are all here, the Black Box exhibition. This is the exhibition. The exhibition Black Box outlined the formation and change of the human and non-human relationships, a story that portrays the flexible and semi-imaginary time sequence. To extend and elaborate on the story, we invited 3 curators. Glenn Adamson was with us just a month ago, that are operating in the visual culture sphere and live in different parts of the world. During the conversation, I will present images from the exhibition in an effort to try and understand if our theory that people from diverse cultural, professional, and social background connect and relate to objects and artifacts around us differently. And I think that's very much suits you, Aric, because you were born in the States, lives in Shanghai, and now you're moving to Rotterdam. So what's your relationship with objects? We can see now through the images I show. My first image is this. It's a handheld axe created 500,000 years ago. In our exhibition, this is the first step in the investigation of the relationship of humans and objects, the intimate encounter between humans and materials. And here you can see a more contemporary hand axe by Dov Ganshro and Ami Drach, and that's another version of their work. I wonder what comes to your mind when you look at those stones.
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, just last night I was reading a story in The Guardian, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was one of their critics who was basically talking about how he was spending all his time looking at all these very high definition images of various cave art around the world, like Lascaux in France and so on. And he sort of, the headline was basically that art peaked 30,000 years ago. I mean, and his argument was that all these sort of great innovations, certainly that in the Western tradition, whether it's kind of, the quote unquote invention of perspective or abstraction and impressionism, all that stuff was already there in these cave paintings from 30,000 years ago. And I think it's interesting to me in this context on a number of levels. One, it actually reminds me of this moment about 10 years ago when a number of designers, younger designers, especially those based in Holland, coincidentally enough, I'm thinking of Wiki Summers and Boaz Cohen and Sayaka Yamamoto of BCXSY, were doing these collections that had this kind of Flintstone-y sort of primitive feel. I guess looking back at that, you know, one can interpret that as being a sort of response to what was then a still kind of emerging predominance of technology in our lives, and so there was a sort of impulse, of course, to revisit something that felt more kind of primordial, right? Or it was almost ironic, slightly nostalgic, slightly conceptual as well. But now, even 10 years later, when I think about these, and also when I think about that article I read last night, I can't help but think that in some ways our frame of reference when it comes to time has changed. And you know, that a lot of that probably has something to do with perhaps our growing awareness of the path that our species and planet are on due to climate change and other forms of human activity. I mean, we can now, you know, with the sort of popularization of the notion of the Anthropocene, you know, this designation that's still under discussion, but there's a growing consensus that we are now in a geological epoch that can be defined by humankind's impact on the planet, called the Anthropocene. The fact that we're now thinking in geological epochs, I think says something to the point where, in some ways, you know, 30,000-year-old rock paintings and these sort of flinty stone tools don't seem so far away, or don't seem so long ago anymore. And then perhaps if you know, if you take the sort of darker route and you know, and think about what many are predicting will be the collapse of civilization in the not too distant future, like a return to the use of these, you know, sort of Stone Age implements almost seems quite plausible, if you follow that line of logic.
Yeah. I'll show you another image. The stone we saw was created as a direct extension of the human body. We can see the same intimacy in other objects created by mankind, like here with this amazing project for Stratasys, designed by Gili Kuchik and Rana Mitai, and they just won the Red Dot Award. But my question is, I ask myself actually, what happens to us when we look at this image, which is the Bereshit lunar launcher, a real black box. And you asked me before, what do I mean by the black box? I mean that we look at objects that we don't really know how they were built, what makes them what they are. And what my question to you is, do we feel the same intimacy like we had with the stone, the first stone that fitted our hand, or those pebbles, or is it a new intimacy that we have with those new objects?
Well, it's interesting that you're showing this sort of, you know, Stone Age tool inspired work alongside this lunar launcher. I mean, you know, if we think of 2001 Space Odyssey, right? I mean, this juxtaposition sort of comes right out of that film, and reminds us how this kind of notion of the primordial and the future and the technological future have kind of been sort of integral to each other in the imaginary, right? You know, that Kubrick, you know, saw those two sort of ostensible extremes as being part of the same kind of narrative and condition. When it comes to the black box, your question about the black box specifically, I guess this sort of just reminds me of I mean, I think this goes back. I mean, we can think of this even in terms of, you know, the arts and crafts movement as it emerged in late 19th century England, right? With the idea was that we needed to, I mean, there are a lot of ideas there, but one of them was that the Industrial Revolution had dissociated human beings from their production, right? And part of that is it goes directly to what you're saying, is that the things that were being produced by machines were things that we could not understand, you know, as laymen, let's say.
And we were frightened of them because of that reason, of course.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so that, of course, prompted a response in the arts and crafts movement, which, as you know, was about sort of reconnecting the hand and making as part of a broader social agenda. And when you think about stone tools and moon launchers now, I mean, it's maybe there's a kind of correlation there, except here, you know, we're talking not about the being, you know, the extent to which many are frightened of the power of the industrialists, but rather now what makes many anxious is the power of the tech companies, right? Because we maybe we can't see, but we at least understand now that much of what is operating our world and our behavior is hidden in these maybe not black boxes, but, you know, shiny white and silver and whatever boxes that we can't really, the inner workings of which we can't fully know.
Yeah. My next image. Let's move another step forward and talk about domestication. We know our role in domesticating nature, but as we all know, nature also domesticates us. We design objects, but we can say that they also design us. If you agree with this statement, I wonder, in what way do you think objects design us?
Well, on the one hand, yeah, these are very big questions, Maya.
I'm sorry.
On the one hand, I mean, the kind of, you know, very well-worn example, but I'm thinking of it now is, because I'm sitting on a chair that's actually very uncomfortable. I mean, it's my fault. It's my chair, but you know, the chairs that sort of iconic, that icon of design for so long. These are things that you know, we did not really evolve with, right? You know, humans spent most of our history squatting, and we invented the chair, or, you know, somehow the chair evolved and became not just it not only shaped the way we hold our bodies, often in unhealthful ways, you know, through sitting postures, but also the way we have demarcated social relations and power relations, and the way that we interact versus, you know, how we sit at tables, the hierarchies in tables and in auditoriums and so on and so forth. So that's one example. Now, when I look at the phone, you know, it kind of, I mean, there are a lot of things we can talk about, but the one thing that it kind of makes me think of is the illusory nature of money, right? Because these phones, you know, used to be able to communicate with people by, you know, putting coins or tokens in the phone, right? These little pieces of metal that somehow had value. Then there were these kind of smart cards that you could use with little chips and so on and so forth, where it wasn't the plastic itself that held the value, but rather the information on it. Nowadays, I don't know about Israel, to be honest. Well, actually, sorry. I mean, now we all have smartphones, but let's just play along with this line of thinking about how we pay. And I live in China right now, and I haven't left in over a year, and I have not touched cash in over a year, as far as I can remember. It's all through mobile apps now. So like nowadays, when I see cash, I'm like, what are these sort of dirty pieces of paper and metal, right? So money becomes data, but then even more so if we look at cryptocurrency, the values ascribed to those data to that data then becomes something that even itself fluctuates. I mean, it's sort of the ultimate it's sort of the ultimate example of the arbitrary nature of scarcity, right? I mean, like a long time ago, money was even if it wasn't even if we were using fiat currency like bills and so on, it was still backed by gold somehow, right? Then the gold standard disappeared and all sorts of things. So now, I mean, it just and this goes a long ways to explaining economic bubbles, which explains all sorts of other phenomenon. It goes a long way towards explaining financial speculation, inequality, and all sorts of things. I mean, even during the pandemic, and I'm not an economist, and I'm sure there's someone in the audience who knows this much better than me. So just excuse me if I don't get it quite right. But this sort of notion of, I think it's called quantitative easing now, and whereby basically governments are able to make billions of dollars appear almost out of thin air, right? Like at the beginning of the pandemic, suddenly you saw all these governments who for so long said that we can't do enough about climate change, we can't do enough about social welfare, we can't do enough about this and that because we don't have the money. Suddenly after the pandemic, when there were business interests at stake, as well as employment, of course, billions, trillions of dollars were suddenly available. So I think that's probably, now that's a long ways from a payphone, but that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, another big question, sorry for that again. In the exhibition, these objects that you see here in the picture are part of the category called invisible objects, objects that are not included in books dedicated to the collection and do not receive a catalog number. I'm talking about the materials and instruments that surrounds, supports, and protects the objects of the collection, and some of them we have in our everyday life, like the vacuum cleaner and the transparent boxes to put in things. In our exhibition, we decided to put those unworthy objects on pedestals. As you were working on amazing the M+ collection, and it is up to museums to decide what is worthy or what is unworthy to present. If you wanted to correct this injustice, some people would think it's injustice, what would you put on a pedestal that is not there?
Well, one thing, so yeah, I mean, I guess this goes back to the question of the difference between collections and archives. I mean, from an institutional perspective, right? Collections being, these sort of curated selections of objects where the focus is on the object. This is sort of rooted, and the qualities of that object embedded in that object, kind of rooted in the sort of connoisseurial tradition, whereas archives are seen as bodies of material that enable kind of research and broader understanding. And it's not so much the object per se, but the subject that the object, meaning the document, let's say, is recording, and there's more process involved than, let's say, final result. I think those distinctions nowadays are definitely blurring, in some faster at some institutions than others, but you know, at M+, we sort of tried to do, tried to take a sort of hybrid approach. I mean, we certainly had the canonical objects, the quote unquote masterpieces in the collection. We did collect some archives as sort of bodies of knowledge, but then there were sort of things that were kind of in between. And one that we did actually put on a pedestal was, you know, we were looking at ways of unpacking the notions of copying, right? Especially being in Hong Kong, being right across the border from Shenzhen, which for a long time was known as a center of piracy and counterfeit goods. I mean, these days it's like a tech capital. But for a long time, it was not known for innovation, and yet it became known for innovation, and that sort of was indicative to us of the idea that copying is in fact is part of a generative process. You know, it's actually not antithetical to innovation, but actually embedded in the process of innovation. But one little thing that I just, so I used to wander around Huaqiang Bay, which is the electronics market in Shenzhen, and that's where you'd see a lot of the funny iPhone, the fake iPhones, and the funny, you know, funny gadgets and gizmos, and there were you could get these, you know, these holographic stickers that manufacturers sometimes put on their products to kind of verify their authenticity, that the cartridges and things like that. In Huaqiang Bay, you can buy those stickers, and so that you could get these beautiful holographic stickers that would say "original" on it, and then of course you can then slap it on anything. And that, of course, both spoke to the piracy industry and its sort of kind of ingenuity, but also it spoke of the idea that originality is kind of what you designate as being original, right? It kind of puts that power into the hands of someone else outside the existing system. But they're also just beautiful objects. So we actually collected those and put those on a pedestal next to like, you know, or not far from by Le Corbusier and so on.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at the original and non-original stuff. This is a picture of the lower gallery just for you to enjoy in the museum, but I will show you our next image. This is the visual identity of the museum. With the technological development and abundance of virtual, digital and intangible manifestations, we as a museum face the question of what is the best way or practice to include these so-called objects in our collection. What the question is, yeah, what are we collecting? Like, this is the case with the visual identity developed for the museum by Professor Aric Chen. How do you think a museum should approach these questions from the collection point of view?
Yeah, well, so I have to admit that this is the first time I'm seeing this new identity system. And what is already kind of interesting to me is that when you look back at the museum's logo, it's of course an evocation of the building by Rana Rod. Mm-hmm. And this then reminds us that the museum was built at a time when there was a kind of euphoria of iconic museum buildings, right? Sort of following up on the famous Bilbao effect, you know, after the opening of the Guggenheim Bilbao, Frank Gehry's building in that Basque city, 1997. Now, to see that those kind of ribbons in that graphic identity sort of twist and sort of morph and so on, this is just my initial reaction. It's a very nice way of kind of building on the identity that the museum has already had, while also acknowledging that museums are not static buildings, but rather they are evolving organisms, right? And so to see that those ribbons kind of move and shift seems like a very nice solution. Am I interpreting it correctly?
Yeah, sure, you are. And I have to say that one of my favorite stories about the museum is that when the municipality of Holon approached Ron Arad and asked him to build a museum, they say to him, we want a building that you can put on a stamp. And I like that definition for iconic architecture of that period. I think that was really one of the museums that was part of that movement of building those iconic buildings. What you see now is the upper gallery. Pardon?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
The upper gallery in the museum. I just wanted you to enjoy some of the pictures, but I'm getting to my last two images. My last two images are two slides of the same coin, nature and technology. This film, this is supposed to be film, but this is not of a good quality, so I show only a picture. The film was recorded as part of the project Rapture Nest Cam. In the end, in the red circle, you can see a blurred drone providing food to a young eagle whose mother was electrocuted by a high tension wire. VR technology allows for the precise control of the distant drone. In the movie, you can see now, this is a film of Guard from Above, which is a Dutch company that sells serial defense services using birds of prey. It provides training for both birds and clients, police units, and armies. Let me just put the movie on.
Wow.
Yeah. In order to intercept hostile drones, the video presents a demonstration of a falcon attacking a drone and grasping it with its claws. Considering these two manifestations, how would you describe the relationship between nature and technology? And how do you think design is reflecting these relations? My last hard question.
Yeah, that's a big question. Gosh, well, I guess, in that last example, the video, in that case, it's nice to see that sometimes nature wins, right? Because in the first example, I mean, it's a wonderful it's a wonderful use of a drone. It's almost heartwarming, right? To see a drone caring for a young. Sorry, was it an eagle or falcon or something eagle who'd lost its mother, but of course it's its mother. So that's an example of how technology maybe could be put to good use, but of course it was technology that killed the mother in the first place via the electrical line. I mean, I guess the relationship between design and nature is probably the big question of our time. And this goes back also to expansions of the thinking around this notion of the Anthropocene, that that we now live in a time defined by the way in which we have changed the planet. I mean, some would argue that we have changed nature so much that nature is now a human construct, right? Like it's all impacted by human activity. There are others who would sort of argue for a kind of re-separation of sorts, let's say, through the kind of notion of rewilding that has been gaining currency in some quarters. Yeah, I mean, I would, yeah, I don't know, but to the extent that, you know, design is also, you know, it's how we articulate not just the world we inhabit, but also our relationship with that world. It's also within design that paradoxically we can recalibrate how we see our place in the world, in and amongst nature. You know, there's a lot of discussion now about you know, multi-species vocalities, right? Like to sort of move beyond a human-centered approach, and there even are discussions about using our human-constructed mechanisms like legal frameworks to give rights to other organisms, you know, as a way of not in a sort of new agey, you know, kind of way, but in a very practical way of creating a mechanism by which other species are protected, to sort of embed that in the sort of systems that that we are sort of stuck in for better or worse. So. Yeah, I think I would love to hear what you think, Maya. Actually, you've been asking me all the questions, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, what I thought was that with what you said, we have the extreme #2 exhibition, State of Extremes, that we are maybe co-creating in the future. Well, that's a huge question about the relationship, and I hope really we can elaborate on that. Thank you very much, Aric. Talking with you is always really enriching and broadening one's horizons. Mine, for sure. I would like to wish you good luck on your new job in the new museum, in the new institute. But since it's really presenting exhibitions, I would relate to it as a museum in a way. Sure. And I'm certain we will have more opportunities to collaborate on the future. I would love to do that. So good luck, and good night. And
likewise, Maya. Yeah, it's always good to see you. Thank you for having me. Thanks to everyone who was watching. And it was a real, I really wish I could come to the museum, because, you know, having worked with you guys for so long, I've actually never seen the collection. So it's a really exciting show that I think really presents a whole other side and depth to the museum that's been maybe hiding in storage for a little while. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you. And I think you would like this exhibition because it really puts the collection out and give us an opportunity to talk about what is a collection and what it is made of. So I will send you pictures so you can see it, and hope to see you soon.
Same here.
Bye-bye and good night to everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.